Hey y'all, so I'll be reviewing something different today. It's from Shonda Rhimes and it's called Queen Charlotte, a Bridgerton story, season 1, episode 1, called Queen to Be. And if you're black, you know that is from Coming to America. And before I get started, I just want y'all to know that I am a huge history buff. I love learning about all of that stuff and, all of the royal families and everyone who's come before, across the pond and stuff like that. Because their history is just so messy and wild and long. And this is a good time because, King Charles III just had his coronation weekend and stuff like that. So I thought it would be interesting to review this show, and also because I love Shonda Rhimes, so why not? But yeah, let's get into it. So it opens up with a man riding a horse onto a large estate with a bunch of servants and stuff like that, and we get to see Charlotte, walking down the hallway or whatever, and there's just no words that's being said. It's just all music and, acting and stuff. And I felt like the acting in the show was actually pretty good. But she catches her brother in his study shaking hands with someone, and obviously he just made a deal. And in those times, that usually meant that the daughter or sister or niece or somebody was getting sold off to be married to someone. And the look on Charlotte's face is like disgust and terror. And she, I guess out of frustration, she just turns around and she pushes a statue onto the floor, breaking it. And the next visual is of her walking away. But then, her brother kind of comes outside to see, what's going on and what happened. And the next thing you see is her walking into the carriage, and her brother's waiting there to hold her hand, and she's just looking at him like, yeah, don't even talk to me, for real. And the next thing you see is the intro, and I don't really know why I mentioned this, but I just really loved it. It was beautiful. So the next scene after the credits opens up with Charlotte and her brother Adolphus in the carriage riding, to London so she can get married. And at this point, they've been in the carriage for about 6 hours, and Adolphus says that she looks like a statue. And they do their brother sister berating each other, and she's like, statues are beautiful, and so basically, thanks for the compliment. And he's looking at her like, but you look awful right now. Charlotte then begins to explain to Adolphus that her dress is made of this, rare whalebone, and that the reason she looks so stiff and uncomfortable is because she can't afford to move her body or she'll ruin her dress and possibly die, being as though she must be a picture of perfection, when going to basically be dissected and inspected by these people in London. And then she's like, how joyful it is to be a lady. Charlotte says that facetiously, but then her brother says that he can see that she's upset, and she's like, she's not upset, she's angry and she can't breathe. And then Adolphus says that, the British Empire basically chose her, and Charlotte says all they need is someone from a royal bloodline who can read and write and have good social graces, and basically somebody who can pop out a whole bunch of babies for them. Charlotte basically says that, they could have chosen anyone, but they went all across the country to Germany looking for her, and it's for a reason. And she's way too smart to know that this wasn't just because, they liked her or something. There was a real reason as to why they wanted her. And her brother kind of condescendingly says, it's because she's special. And Charlotte says that they are strangers to her and her brother, and she and her brother are strangers to them. So what is the reason that they want her? Like, why? And Charlotte says that it can't be a good reason as to why they want her because Adolphus hasn't looked her in the eye since he told her. And then he says it's a good thing and that she'll be happy. And Charlotte says that, to turn the carriage around, that she isn't going to go. And they exchange, yes, no's, yes, no's. And then Charlotte threatens to impale herself with her dress or with her corset. Adolphus begins to mansplain to Charlotte and basically saying that, she's too smart for her own good, and he's gone on to let her think that she can make decisions and stuff when that's not how any of this works. And, I don't have an older brother, but I would have been annoyed. Like, how dare you? I'm the smartest person in this room. How dare you? Charlotte begins to rebut, but then Adolphus cuts her off and says that, they're the British Empire and they, she and Adolphus come from a small province in Germany, and that you don't say no to the British Empire, and that he didn't really have a choice, and that there is no good reason as to why they wanted her, and that he knows that no one that looks like them, no one that is black, basically, has ever married those people, but he can't make an enemy of the most powerful nation on the earth. So it's done. She gotta shut it up, suck it up, and be happy about it, basically. Charlotte looks like she wants to tell Adolphus to fuck off, to be honest. But then she kind of is just like, okay, whatever. And then Adolphus says that he's sorry, but there are worse things than marrying the King of England. That's obviously some foreshadowing, and we know what that is and what comes later, but you know how they gotta put that in there. So now we're back to modern day England, where Queen Charlotte is waking up and walking down the dark halls in her nightgown, and she makes it to the front doors where the royal physician is waiting, and he apologizes for the interruption, and Charlotte, gets straight to the point, and she's just like, is the king dead? Is the king dead? And if you ever watched Bridgerton, you'll know that that was something that Charlotte did all the time because of how strenuous, the king's health had been, basically damn near their whole marriage. So when she got straight to the point here, of course, she's kind of holding her breath like, is he dead? Like, just say it or whatever. The physician stumbles and says that the king is fine, everything is cool with him. And then Charlotte, has a sigh of relief. And then she, kind of goes on a tangent and says, you can't be interrupting my beauty sleep and all of that, you know what I'm saying? If she could still behead people, he'd be in the queue, basically like, why you wake me up with this nonsense and the king's not dead? But then he kind of is like, your majesty, like, hold up, just because the king not dead, hold up. And then she's like, well, if the king isn't dead, then who is? The next scene is of Lady Whistledown explaining that the Princess Royal Charlotte of Wales has died during childbirth. And the scenes it sets on Prince George IV, he's the regent right now, looking over his daughter's casket with Queen Charlotte, feigning grief and comfort for her son. And he's a wreck, like he's just completely a wreck. And you'll notice later on the reason why Queen Charlotte is so distant with her kids. I'm pretty sure she had some postpartum. And I remember reading before the real Queen Charlotte basically saying that, she hated being pregnant. She was pregnant for a whole decade straight. I could not imagine 15 kids. Good God. The king couldn't keep his hands off of all of that. But, the scene continues, and you see Lady Danbury and Violet Bridgerton getting their Lady Whistledown papers. And in the background, Whistledown is saying that the crown succession is in danger since the heir apparent and the queen's grandchild is dead. So what will happen to the line? And then Whistledown questions Queen Charlotte's matchmaking skills. And as Queen Charlotte is walking down the halls past all her family portraits, you can see like the pain and strain being a queen, a wife, and a mother has been on to her. And I can't even imagine like She was so young when she was 17 when she married this 23-year-old man, going to a completely different country that she don't know. Yeah, she knows the language, but she doesn't know any of these people, and they're just telling her, okay, well, you have to marry this whole man and pop out babies for him just because we said so. That is crazy to me. Now, this next scene is what had me through, because if you know who this white woman is right here, if you've ever seen Game of Thrones, you already know that this white woman right here, Michelle Farley, loves to piss me the fuck off. She loves playing some bitchy mother, but she plays it well. So Charlotte and Adolphus are walking in the hallway, and he tells her to behave, and then you see Charlotte standing in front of Princess Augusta, who is King George III's mother, and she's presenting herself, and they're basically inspecting her, trying to see if she got good hips for making children and all of this stuff. And Charlotte is standing in a room with about 10 other people, just gawking at her, just rating her on whether or not her teeth are appropriate and all of this stuff. But the part that killed me, boy, is when Princess Augusta licked her thumb and tried to wipe away Charlotte's mole. When I tell you that lady know how to piss me off, ooh, child. I was livid. Like, the fact that we're still living through these microaggressions, and this was hundreds of years ago. I'm just, oh, it had me sick, Lord. And just as Princess Augusta was trying to wipe away Charlotte's mole, Charlotte was asking, like, when can I meet the king? And that later on becomes a thing, like, where's the king? Can you tell me about the king? What is going on? Because I've never seen this man. I don't know this man. And I need y'all to tell me something. And that felt like Princess Augusta's way of trying to change the subject, basically. Like, nah, we're going to stick to you because later on you see why we don't talk about the king. Look, we don't talk about Bruno. We don't talk about the king. So then they get into the conversation about Charlotte's wedding dress, and Augusta says that, all right, Brimsley, which is Charlotte's, like, second in command, basically somebody who follows her around, her shadow. Princess Augusta tells Brimsley to take Charlotte to go get her dress size or whatever. And Charlotte's like, nah, you good, shorty. I brought me my dress from home. The nuns in Paris made it. They named it Alamo. You know what I'm saying? I got this shit. I'm gonna be fly. And Augusta's, basically continues with her macro aggressiveness, in my opinion, saying that, if you're going to be in this family, you got to follow the family rules, and all that flashy shit, the ethnic shit you got going on over there, that ain't going to fly over here, shouty. Augusta basically says that, Charlotte's dress got too much going on. Her European gown, right? Her European gown has too much going on, but their English wedding gown is traditional and better, as if England isn't in Europe. Now, when I tell y'all they don't know no fucking geography, that put the nail on the coffin for me. Because what the hell you mean? Her European dress is too European for y'all English shit, when England is okay, all right, mother knows best, right? Fuck out of here. So once all that cringy shit is over, Adolphus struts over to Charlotte and tells her that he'll see her at the ceremony. And I'm just like, this is a typical nigga selling us off to fatten his pockets, and the whole time he's putting Charlotte in a position to be one of the most powerful people in the world, who is going to end up telling him what the fuck to do later on. I'll never understand it. Like, it's like before, women back in the day would have a man or husband or something, they would need to cater to whatever male in their family has the funds and has the money to take care of them. And then as soon as they get married off, they're so much more powerful than the person who just sold them off. And I know that was the whole point of Adolphus doing that, but like, this shit is sickening. I cannot, because y'all still doing this shit to this day. And something that not a lot of people know is that King George III never ever cheated on Queen Charlotte. You know, most kings, they take mistresses and all kinds of stuff. But, you know, out of all the years that they were married, he never cheated on her. And I just think that that is something to mention, because, you know, kings can do whatever they want. And even though he was mad, you know, he never took advantage of her, which I just think is beautiful. So Charlotte is on her way to her dress fitting, and then she realizes that this little short white man has been following her this whole time. And she like slows down some, and then she speeds up. And he does the same thing. He'll slow down and then he'll speed up. And then she asks, like, you know, why are you following me, basically? And then Brimley explains that he'll always be around when she needs him or when she asks him to. And then she asks Brimsley to walk with her because she has some questions, and he's like, you know, he's sorry he can't do that. Basically, y'all not friends, guh. That he worked for you. And I'm not sure if anyone else noticed, but they were already calling Charlotte Your Majesty and bowing to her and things like that. And she hadn't even been married to George just yet. She hasn't been crowned just yet. And she's already being called queen and you know, being bowed to and things like that. Like, I love that. Because it's just like, yeah, you know, ain't nothing stopping this. This is your queen to be, literally. So act accordingly. Thank you. Charlotte then asks again, like, you know, tell me something about the king. And Brimsley, you know, is just dotting down all the king's credentials. He's the king of Great Britain and Ireland. He's the monarch. He's the ruler. All this, all that. Shit we already know. And Charlotte's just like, you done said the same thing 3 times over now. You know, and Brimsley's just like, well, it's all still a fact. And then he goes back to his post like, she not getting nothing out of him. To me, that just shows how loyal Brimsley is to the monarchy and to the crown and stuff. Now, I feel like he fucks with the king, like him and the king, they cool or whatever, but he don't play about his queen. And that, you know, they show that later on in Bridgerton, where he would just do anything for her. So I just love seeing everybody's backstories, not just the queen and the kings, but even, you know, Lady Danbury and Violet and just everybody's. Princess Augusta is sitting down with Lord Bute and the rest of them clowns, and basically saying that they didn't tell her that Charlotte would be so brown. That brown. Very brown. Specifically is what she said. And then they discuss canceling the wedding. And they say that it's, i.e. Charlotte, is a problem. And then they play political word games. Basically, you know, the king, whatever the king says is right. And, you know, if the king says that this is what's cool, then this is what we're going to do. And then Augusta brings up the idea of giving the black people of the ton titles and expanding the guest list to the wedding to add to Charlotte's court, because she wasn't expecting Charlotte to be black. And of course they didn't have pictures and shit, but I mean, you know, cameras and FaceTime and shit, but they had portraits. But you know, later on in another episode, they force Charlotte's portrait to be lighter than what it is. And I believe that they actually really did do that in, you know, history in real time, because, you know, in her portraits, you can tell she's darker than everybody else, but she's still passing. So that's the goal. You know, you can be whatever you want, but you gotta look white somehow. So now we see the black people of the ton receiving their wedding invitations to the royal wedding. And then you see poor Lady Danbury getting suffering through relations with her husband. And, you know, once he's done, because she never gets to finish, poor thing, he says that he has a surprise. And then Agatha, she leaves the room and she goes to wash herself, wash that man off. And then she berates her maid about not warning her that he was basically ready to get freaky deaky. The maid begins to say that she didn't have any warning either, but that the surprise is probably why there was no warning, and that Lady Danbury and Lord Danbury have been invited to the royal wedding. Agatha is looking at her maid like, girl, shut up, show me that letter, because I know you lying like shit. So the next scene is of Charlotte being fitted for her wedding gown, and she continues to ask the help around her what the king is like. Is he ugly? Is he crazy? Is he mean? Is he deformed? All that stuff. And Brimley is basically just like, just wait till you see him. And if you know what happens later, that Charlotte basically kind of foreshadows, the king's mental state. And then she asks Brimsley if he's always there whenever she needs him. And Brimley says yes, whenever she needs him. And then Charlotte kind of hints that she needs some privacy. And Brimsley clears the room. And then Charlotte just kind of looks at herself mundanely in the mirror like, what the hell has my brother got me into? So the members of the ton are starting to arrive at the palace for the wedding, and you see Lord and Lady Danbury, and Lord Danbury tells Agatha not to gawk like a peasant, like, okay, you crunchy, leathery looking old man, get the fuck out of my face. But then you see Brimsley is like looking frantically around in the foyer or whatever as Princess Augusta walks by and says that she'll meet the ton first and explain the king's wants and needs, and basically explain the king's intentions. And in regards to Agatha and the Danburys, I had been speaking out of turn. Just at this moment is when Princess Augusta appoints them as Lord and Lady. So they were really just Mr. and Mrs. Danbury before, but now they are appointed Lord and Lady. And Augusta basically just walks down the aisle and gives all the black people Lord and Lady titles to bring the ton together, so she says. So now they show Brimsley meeting with Reynolds to have a side conversation where the king and Adolphus are. And Brimsley says that the queen is missing. And then George overhears what he says, and so does Adolphus, and they both kind of make faces. And then they show Charlotte scanning the scene where the wedding party is gathered and where she'll be walking down the aisle. And then Agatha catches a glimpse of her. And then Charlotte ends up finding some steps and made her way to a garden where she tries to climb the garden wall. Now we're at the promo that they put out for the show to begin with. This is a promo part, and I thought this whole thing was so cute, how she's basically berating him to help her escape from marrying him, and she not even knowing that is who, she is to marry, because she's been asking, like, what is a king like? What does he look like? Tell me something about him, and no one would give her anything. So I guess she was just like, fuck it, I gotta get out of here. And he shows up at the perfect time, literally stopping her. And their whole exchange is just very cute and innocent, and I thought it was a nice introduction. If it were me, I'd still be scared, like, who is this strange man? He fine, but who is this strange man that I'm supposed to be marrying still? And Charlotte was just lost for words, because I guess she wasn't expecting him to be as cute and as gentlemanly and kind and all of that stuff, which that ends up changing later on. But I thought this whole exchange was really cute. So then George asked her, well, what do you want to know? And she's like, everything. And he wasn't expecting that shit, but he put out all his little nerdy credentials and all of this stuff, how he likes to farm and he's into astronomy and all of that stuff like that. And she's just looking so, like, in shock and actually in awe. And then after their pleasantries or whatever, Adolphus shows up, kind of like saying, where the hell you been at? We've been looking for you, girl. And demanding her to marry George. And then George tells Adolphus that Charlotte must decide for herself, and that she's still deciding. And then after George, walks away and says, I hope you say yes. I'll be the one standing next to the Archbishop of Canterbury. Adolphus walks over to Charlotte and asks her, like, she hopes she isn't still hesitant about everything. And then Charlotte says that she needs to change. So now we finally get to the wedding scene. And this is the one wedding Michelle Farley didn't die at. If you if you watch Game of Thrones, you know what I mean. Hashtag red wedding. But anyways, as Charlotte's walking down the aisle with her brother or whatever, you can tell that those white women weren't expecting Charlotte to be so fine, because they just kind of like, oh shit, who's this baddie up in her? So as Charlotte's walking down the aisle, Agatha says that all the pieces are falling into place, and you could just see on her face that she could see the future and how beneficial that this marriage would be. And I just had this thought, like, look at how they turned black people into being royalty, making it seem like it's so far-fetched when we have been royalty, and they couldn't accept a black king, but a black queen is a must, period. So then they show the reception and the dancing and the smiling and the stares, right? But then after that's over, they show the guests leaving the wedding party, and the king and queen, standing by to greet everyone as they leave. And Adolphus says his weird ass goodbyes to his sister. And then Agatha walks up to the queen and makes her introductions and congratulates the queen, and told her that, she'll be one of her ladies in waiting at court. You can just tell the queen is so excited to see somebody that looks like her. And, every black person has that feeling like, we in a sea with all this milk, and it's only a few raisins out this bitch. But then the queen says, they'll be great friends and all of that stuff. And we already know what that means. And then Agatha moves closer to the queen and tells her to be careful, and that if she ever sends for her, that she will always come. And then Charlotte makes this look like a worried look, like a, what does she mean by that? You know what I'm saying? And then as George leans over and tells Charlotte that he has a surprise for her, Halo by Beyonce plays in the background. Lord, Shonda got that good money to be playing these songs, y'all. They done play like 15 Beyonce songs. They put a Alicia Keys up in here. They put Whitney Houston up in here. They put SZA, y'all. Yeah. Shonda was in her bag. So they arrive to Buckingham House, and it's just a disaster. Charlotte says that, like, oh, it's such a beautiful house, whose is it? And George says that he had it renovated for Charlotte. And Charlotte's like, oh, this is nice, But as she, starts to give him the compliment, he starts to explain that basically this is her house here, and he has an estate in Kew that he'll be staying at. And then she's like, well, I'll just go back to Kew with you. And he's, trying to explain that, like, no, he's going to be leaving her here. And she's just kind of like, absolutely not. I thought, we were supposed to have a wedding night. Her governess told her that they are supposed to have a wedding night because they're a couple. And George is like, oh, well, are you demanding that I perform my marital duty onto you? And she's like, no, I don't even know exactly what all of that is, but I just know that aren't we supposed to spend this night together? You can tell George is getting frustrated, and he hesitates some, and then he's like, fine, he'll stay. And then he basically races inside, and she's just chasing his ass. And as, they're rushing inside, the staff meets them and greets them and is cheering for them and stuff. But then she calls after him and saying that she can't keep up. And then he turns around all exasperated and stuff, saying, he thought that she wanted him in the bedroom. And she says, no. And he's like, no, and she's like, not if he's going to be acting that way. And then Charlotte says that whatever she's done to upset him, that she's sorry for it. And then George said that Charlotte doesn't have to be sorry. He just wants to go back to Q. And then Charlotte was like, okay, let's go to Q, but he doesn't want her to go. And then he says that, Buckingham House is her home. And then Charlotte says that, but Q is his home then. And then she's like, okay, I see. And then George says, okay, good. Then, he'll talk to her later because she's okay. Charlotte says that no, she isn't all right, and then asks George if that is how their marriage is going to be, with her here and him there. And then he says yes. And then Charlotte asks why. And then George says it's because it's easier. And then Charlotte asks, easier for whom? And then you can just tell that, as the king, he's not used to being questioned and stuff, but this is your queen. This is your queen. And you gonna answer to her if you're not gonna answer to nobody else, whether y'all just met or not. Charlotte says that, she just wants to understand, and that he has, the least he can do is explain. And then he explodes and was just like, he has decided he's the king, and that, that's just what they're gonna do. And that's just real fucked up for him to be yelling at her on their wedding night. You know what I'm saying? She barely even understands what a wedding night is, and he just exploding. And, we get it. It's because he not trying to let her see all of him, but damn, boy, you could have, gave her a little something. You ain't have to yell at her. Charlotte shuts down, and then she's like, I thought you were just George, but that's a bet for real. You can keep that energy. And then she says, can she leave, or does, he need her for anything else? And then he realizes that, he's hurt her. So he tries to step forward and reach out to her, but she steps away from him. And then George says that is for the best. And then Charlotte says, of course, whatever he wishes, because, he's the king. So, basically, Charlotte walks away, George walks away, and Brimsley's looking like, oh shit, what the fuck did happen? But then, he follows behind Charlotte, and Charlotte calls for him basically to see if he's still there behind her, which he always is. And she's just fed the fuck up, and then just tells Brimsley to stop following her, and then to stop calling her queen and everything. But Brimsley is just like, he can't, because that's who she is. She's the queen. And Charlotte orders him to stop following her, and then she says that she doesn't want him there. And Brimsley says that, he hopes that in time that Charlotte will get used to him. And then Charlotte says, great, that they can spend the rest of their lives together. Like, damn, I'm stuck with you, Loki. So we flash back to modern day, where the queen and Brimsley are going to meet the queen and king's children. And then she asks Brimsley if they're sober, and Brimsley says that he doesn't know. And, basically to flip a fucking coin. And this is all after the Princess Royal's funeral. And the queen is like, damn, it's only 11 in the morning, you're already drunk as shit. But the doors open, and the queen is basically telling her children that they need to, get married and make an heir. And, that basically all they've done is made a whole bunch of, illegitimate children for her to ignore, because those kids cannot be on the throne, nowhere near it. She basically tells her kids, y'all need to start having some legitimate babies. And then one of her daughters says that, she's been trying or whatever. And then she tells her daughter, like, are you having trouble finding out where to put it? Like, girl, what's going on? Should have been had these babies. And then, the queen, always with a quick jape, says, it's virgins to the left of her and a horse to the right of her. Talking about her sons. Charlotte then mentions how the only heir to the throne is dead. And then George IV starts crying hysterically because she's talking about his daughter. And, she tries to kind of comfort him or whatever. And then she tells all her children that, their line will end with their dad if they don't start having kids and stuff and start having legitimate children. And then Charlotte says that she and the king made 15 royal babies all on their own. And she doesn't understand how our kids can't even just make one. And then George starts crying and shit again. And now, because I'm the history nerd, what I know is that at the end of all of this, they end up with Queen Victoria, right? And everybody knows who she is because she was on the throne for hella long. But not a lot of people knew that Queen Victoria is the grandchild of King George III and Queen Charlotte. Now, in the real history, it wasn't Queen Charlotte or King George who told the kids, who basically forced them to get married. It was Parliament who basically bribed all of the sons with money and stuff, and promises to pay off their debts and things like that if they did get legitimate marriages so they can produce an heir. And it wasn't until long after Queen Charlotte and King George were already dead where Victoria would then end up being born. But I think it was interesting how they had, ended up making it seem like it was the queen who forced them, because at this point, if she was around at that point where they were still lollygagging and shit, she probably would have told them, if y'all don't hurry up and have these fucking kids. And another fact is that King George III actually didn't want his daughters to get married because he didn't want them to be unhappy the same way he saw his sisters be unhappy being married off to, old men that they don't know and stuff. So that is a reason why the daughters never really got married and moved on and had kids. But that was no excuse for the sons, because, they were the heirs and the spares and stuff, and they know that they are supposed to supply something, and they wasn't doing none of that. Just nothing. Just lazy. Now we're just at the final scene of the episode where Charlotte is sitting in her bed alone on her wedding night, looking like she regrets all of this, and then she says to herself that she should have climbed over the wall, and girl, if he wasn't fine, I would have agreed. But, it all ends up working out. But I would have been pissed. How y'all take me from my house, force me to marry some random man I don't even know. Y'all wouldn't even tell me about his ass. And then at the end of the night, he ruins my wedding night. And I didn't even want to marry this joker in the first place. I would have been pissed. I would have found a wall and climbed over it right then and there. It's like, no. But, yeah, that's my review for Queen Charlotte, a Bridgerton story, season 1, episode 1, called Queen to Be. You guys let me know if you want me to review any more. I plan on trying to finish the season. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. So you guys let me know what you think, and make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thanks.